Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Lauren Payne on the podcast, coming to us all the way from Tennessee, where, I hope the weather's better than it is up here. If it isn't, then, I'm very depressed about the current state of the world. She's a Middle Tennessee State grad, so quick tangent here. I was playing NCAA football a little bit over this COVID break because, I had so much free time on my hands. And I said, I'm going to take a really crappy football team and I'm going to turn them into a powerhouse. I actually chose Middle Tennessee State. So it was just a random team that I was flicking through, and I was like, oh, the Blue Raiders, I like their jerseys, and I was like, oh, I'll turn them around. So after about 3 years, I turned them into a national champion. So, at least in that universe, they won the national championship. But then I saw, when I was looking at guests to have on, I saw that she was from Middle Tennessee State, and I was like, oh wow, the coincidence. I've never even met anyone that's went there. But yeah, so we have a connection there already. She played softball there, and then she's an NPC bikini competitor, and she's also a member of Team Fit Bliss. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, I got to ask first of all, because I love torturing myself, what is the weather like in Tennessee today?
Today, finally, we're going to hit like the 40s. And so that's really exciting. It's going to feel so good because it has been in like the 30s, 20s, 30s. So it's been a little bit rough. But today, I'm excited.
Well, at least it's better than the weather that we have here. It's like 10 degrees here, but, it doesn't seem like it's that much better. Normally, when I think of Tennessee, I thought it would be like, at least in the 60 degrees. Like, I've had some of those Florida guests where they complain about that, and it's like, oh, I hate you people. But before we get into that, Lauren, why don't you give us your backstory on what really inspired and motivated you to, adapt bodybuilding? Because, going from softball to bodybuilding, that's a jump that I don't think that many of our guests, if any, have ever done. Actually, we did have one softball player that went into bodybuilding. But what's your story?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple, I'd say. Definitely like a good journey when I look back on it, and I'm super thankful for everything that happened to get me where I am now. But basically, like you said, I did play softball in college. I played softball all my life, so it definitely was quite the jump to switch to bikini, especially asking like my dad. He supported me like every step of the way. So when I was like, "Hey, Dad, instead of coming to my softball game, will you come to my bikini competition?" It was a whole thing. But basically, like I said, I played sports. When I got out of college, for people who are like athletes in college, you definitely have like a hole that you're missing, like once you go into the real world. So it took me some time to figure out what I could do to kind of give me back that competitive edge. So I started looking into becoming a personal trainer. Once I did, I had people just tell me, "Hey, you should give bodybuilding a shot. You kind of got a good physique, blah blah blah." And so, long story short, I found Fit Bliss, and they actually sponsored me. So at that point, I just took the initiative to give it a shot, and so I did my first competition, and I loved it. As soon as I stepped on stage, I just knew it was for me. And then that's kind of like how we ended up where we are now, and it's just gotten more competitive as I've grown in the sport. So,
Well, what position did you play in softball?
I was an outfielder and a slapper, if you know what that is.
Oh God. No, I was. Well, hey, slappers are fine. I was more of a power guy myself when I was at the plate. But so when I wasn't pitching, I was usually in right field just because I had a nice arm too. But yeah, yeah, softball. I've tried to hit a softball pitcher one time. It's almost impossible for me, at least, just because it's just so weird. But the only reason I wish I was a softball pitcher though too is that you could pitch basically like every game. Your arm doesn't get tired, which I was like, oh my God, if I could not have a tired arm where I wouldn't have to sit out like 2 or 3 games in between starts. Oh my God, that would be great. But yeah, that's incredible too. But when you were getting started in bodybuilding, or even before then, did you have any knowledge of the sport, or was it something that you were completely new with and you just had to do your research on?
Definitely a lot of research. It's funny when I look back, I've really only been in bodybuilding for a little over 2 years now. But to think about what I knew then is nothing like I know now. I really had to put a lot of time and research into it, and I'm still learning new things every day. But it's definitely helped me on the side of like my personal training as well, because I've learned so much about how my body works, so I can use that for other people as well. So.
So when you're talking about how your body works, one thing that I love to talk about is, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to that overall package that people end up seeing. What was that experience like for you? Because if you were to walk up to someone and say, like, hey, what'd you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you. So it's just so much trial and error, sort of figuring out, hey, how does my body respond best?
Yeah, so, do you mean, like, how did I figure out for my
Yeah, because it's oh, we got dog alert, everyone. We got warned, but again, we got another dog alert. What's the dog's name?
So this is Noonie, so I actually have 2 dogs. This isn't the mastiff boxer mix. This is, well, she's just a mix, we don't really know, but she's sweet, so
That's so cute. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm a huge dog lover. I'm a corgi guy myself. They have little corgi races down at the horse track close to where I live, where owners bring their corgis and they race them. It's the greatest thing that you've ever seen. Like yeah, and then they like let you meet them at the end. That's one of my favorite days of the year. There's like hundreds of corgis just around there, but no, yeah, you'll never meet a bigger dog lover than mine. So that's awesome. So and again, everyone, that dog podcast that I've been talking about, it is coming out. Every time I think that I'm done editing it, another dog pops on the podcast. I was like, okay, we got to add another one now. So I might just wait until the end of this whole podcast run and be like, okay, here's your like 4 hours of dogs being on the podcast. But yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, yeah, what I kind of meant to ask was like with your own individual journey, like how did you figure out what worked best for you? Because I like asking it because so many people don't realize that like, hey, if I do exactly what she did, it's not going to give me the same amount of results. So it just so many people got to realize that it's their own individual journey that they got to really figure out first.
yeah, so I definitely say at the beginning of my journey, besides, like, the Fit Bliss stuff, which I'll get into that in just a second, but just at my individual journey, I looked a lot on Instagram. I saw, like, the workouts that they were doing, but I still had knowledge from, like, when I was, just from the gym in general. And I kind of was trying to compare those. And to me, it didn't really make sense of how these girls looked like they did on Instagram versus what, they were showing that they were working out or like how they were doing it for and things like that. So it definitely took some time to realize like Instagram's different than like what it is when you actually are working hard you know, um, to adjust like your body to where it needs to be. So with that, luckily I had a lot of guidance from Fit Bliss and they're big on like women's health and things like that. So I think that they were a huge step in the right direction for me to know how my body works specifically. A lot of coaching, they actually don't go into as much detail as Fit Bliss does. So like I know exactly why I'm eating this or why how many vitamins I literally have in my body by what I'm consuming, all these like different factors that a lot of people are just like, here's your prescribed nutrition or here's your prescribed workout, and they don't say anything. So I think I've been really blessed as Fit Bliss has guided me through that, and that's a big step in my journey that's helped me. So
Which I mean, if there's one thing I can say in this podcast is, get that help that you need when you get started, because so many people I think fall into that where they think that they can just do it by themselves, and then, you know, that usually has disaster. So I mean, unless you have that background, where if you're someone like me who had that background in the gym, where like you knew your basic stuff, then you might not need help. But like for the vast majority of people listening to this podcast, yeah, make sure that you ask for help, because other than that, I mean, you won't really have that much accountability. But I love to talk genetics on this podcast because another thing, so many people are on Instagram, or I should say basically everyone, and I hear this all the time. Oh my God, I want his arms. I want her abs. I want their back. You can only be the best version of yourself. I don't know how many times I have to shake down people and just be like, you just need to understand that like you're not going to look the way that they look. You don't know how they got to attain that look. You don't know, what their diet is. You don't know how hard they train. I mean, it's so individualized. But on top of that, whenever someone first gets started working out, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And they have that one body part that just
mhm.
drags behind that they have to train to oblivion to get it to catch up. What were those examples for you when you were getting started?
Yeah, so getting started, I definitely would say that I had nice glutes, like, for like what I was, for my package, but so that was really nice just to be on stage, and that was like my main thing that I did well with. I also have really nice calves, which is kind of weird. So I've actually never really trained calves. So that's really nice. But I definitely have to work hard for my delts and like back and my like lat taper. But everybody has those things to work on. So
So my back was the one thing that took off for me because I had jobs in college of, working in warehouses where you loaded trucks and basically you got a really nice back you quit. But being a pitcher, I'm also 6'3". So my legs and my lower body are just absolutely shot where I could inject pure muscle into any part of my leg and it wouldn't grow. Calves, I could do 10,000 calf raises a day, and there's a little bit there, but there's apps. I mean, it's yeah, that's the number one genetic thing too, where you either have them or you don't have them. Some people say that you can train them, and it's like those people. I always tell them, if you can train your calves to look better, that means that you already have genetically blessed to be able to do that. Because I know so many people that don't. But yeah, I mean, I love asking that question because it does show, everyone's body's different, and you're not gonna get those same results. But I mean, one of the most important things that we talked about before we started this podcast is, it's a myth that I've heard so many times that, if I were to have a nickel for every time I heard that, I'd be having my butler serve me, something while we were talking behind you. Where, I mean, it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there are just so many people that, especially women, that have that fear that if they walk into the gym and they even look at the weights, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle. And, it's just so not true. And it's something that, like I said, it's gotten better, but it still exists. Did you ever have that fear when you were getting started, even though you had that background in athletics? And even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you still hear that today. How do you like to respond to that?
Yeah, no, luckily I didn't have that fear. I really trusted the process, and I've learned that if you want curves, if you want womanly curves, you've got to work out. You've got to build muscle in the places that matter. So when I have clients that actually talk to me about that, or that's one of the first things they say, I really emphasize that, and I actually will show them like a picture of what I looked like. And don't get me wrong, I've always looked athletic, but just from like what I looked like, just playing ball versus now, I definitely have much more like womanly curves based on the muscle that I've been putting on. So I think that's super important to let women know that. So yeah.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's just, and again, if that does happen to you where you work out once and you get huge, I mean, give me a call because I'm more than happy to talk with you. But one thing that, yeah, well, same with every single guest on the podcast. I mean, you would make millions of dollars just off of all the guests that I had on, basically. They'd spend their entire life savings along with me just to train with you once. But I mean, on top of that, I always say the one thing that impacts women so much more positively than men, it impacts men as well, though, is the confidence boost that working out gives you. We have had hundreds of women on this podcast that have, shared stories about how, it's either helped them become more assertive or like make a life change. There's always something that you can take from this sport in a positive way. But how did you let that positivity and that, confidence boost impact your life? Because I mean, that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact every single aspect of your life.
Yeah, so I kid you not. I mean, everybody's like, so many people have reached out to me and said the same thing. But ever since I started my like official fitness journey, post softball, post being an athlete like that, and becoming a bodybuilding athlete, it my life has taken off. Like it's insane. I mean, I've I've literally like if I had a dream board, I've like surpassed my whole dream board. And so it's amazing. I think that like people can literally see like the joy in your heart just when like you're happy internally with like, how your training's going and things like that. And obviously mentally is huge. And I think that, working out, it really has changed my mindset. So basically, I'll kind of go into like a cool little story about me as well that I didn't go into earlier. So when I got out of college, I actually was kind of like I said, I was like lost in this weird spot where I was like, I don't know, like what I'm supposed to do and this and that. And so I actually had an opportunity at a bank. And don't get me wrong, like I moved up really quickly. I started as a floating teller. Then I was a teller at a specific branch because they loved me. And then I moved into a head teller position, which is basically like a manager of all the tellers, and I definitely had a lot more room to grow. But I remember sitting there and looking across from me and seeing the people in the desk that were across from me that were considered like the highest paid people in the bank. And I just remember thinking that I just don't want to be them. And I was already starting my fitness journey at that point. But I remember thinking I have so much more to me than that. And I definitely know that fitness like basically took off after that for me. And I'm so thankful for it. But that mindset of being an athlete and where I was in my training took me and propelled me into who I am now. And that's literally only been 2 years ago that I was sitting in that bank pretty much. And then now I'm an online trainer for Fit Bliss. I'm a head coach for F45. I'm living just a great life. I have so many opportunities that come to me daily, and I'm gonna be a pro this year, I hope. But but we just got all these good things going for me, and I definitely think that that attributes to where I was in my fitness journey. So
Well, I gotta ask, how would you? I would never be able to work in a bank myself personally, just because with all that money, I'd be like, oh my god. all that money and I can't even touch it. That's just ridiculous. And dealing with some people like depositing all these huge amounts of money and be like, screw you, man. This is ridiculous. But yeah, I've had friends that have worked in banks, and yeah, it's definitely, you got to be a special type of person, I think, to really like get high up in a bank. So I know what you're talking about when you say like I don't want to be like some of those people. But yeah, and now I mean, one of the most important things, it's talked about a little bit on Instagram, but it's not talked about, I don't think, as much as it should be, is just the nutrition that this lifestyle entails and the healthy and fit lifestyle in general. Because I mean, you could work out every day, and if you don't have good nutrition, yeah, you'll see some results, but they won't be, nearly like, they probably be like 10% of what you normally see if you actually followed a good nutritional plan. So what were some of the nutritional changes that you made when you started into bodybuilding? Because I mean, you're already in good shape from softball, but obviously you probably had to put on a little bit of size and stuff. So how did you manage that nutrition wise?
Yeah, so at first it definitely was tough, just like adjusting and like changing your habits. Just because beforehand I didn't really think too much about what I ate. I just kind of ate when I was hungry, and I mean, I definitely had more fast food and things like that on occasions. But I didn't eat terrible necessarily. But when I changed into, how I eat now, I learned that there's a balance. And that was the biggest thing for me. And we do macros at I'm sorry, Fit Bliss. And so with macros, I was able to fit in treats that I felt like, made me happy, even, and weren't maybe as nutritious as like, some of the regular stuff, but I made sure to hit, my micronutrients and things like that. And then incorporate those treats. And then that really helped me balance out because I still love sweets, don't get me wrong. And I still love some good food, but I like to feel good too. And I think that's something that keeps me on track as well now is when you do go off track, you just don't feel good, and I like to feel good. Plus, I like the stuff I eat. I make sure they're good. You'll see it. What I posted on Instagram a lot of
I was
different
gonna
recipes.
say, I'll put up some pictures of it now of what she eats and stuff like that. And yeah, it does look pretty tasty, but I mean, yeah, it's just the nutrition aspect is something that is not nearly as focused on as it is. And when it also comes to this, I mean, pandemic, we'll get into it a little bit later, but there were some shortages of like meat and stuff. And did that affect you in any way? Because up here, I mean, I live, within 15 minutes of farmland, so it was pretty big up here. But was there anything down there that really was a shortage of during the pandemic?
Oh yeah, no shot at getting chicken. There was occasional times that I'd get like the frozen chicken, which I don't know if you've ever cooked it, or maybe I just don't know what I'm doing, but it just never turned out like some, regular fresh
So you're
chicken.
talking about like actually cooking it instead of like putting it in an oven or something like that?
Yeah, well, I usually use an Instapot.
Oh, okay.
But either way, it was just different. It didn't taste. It was like rubbery kind of compared to what like fresh chicken would be. But I couldn't get fresh chicken at all. I did a lot of tuna. But yeah, we definitely had a huge shortage, and that was right when I started into my cut. So it was definitely a little tricky at first.
See, with my chicken, I gotta have it almost absolutely burnt, where it's gotta be almost brown. Because I had one bad experience a couple of years ago where I accidentally undercooked some chicken, and then I got really, really sick from it. So then I'm like, okay, yeah, now it's gotta be burnt to a crisp. So there's no way that there's anything in there other than chicken. So for me, it's like really crunchy now and stuff, and I'm fine with it. But that's I mean, people gotta cope in other ways with that type of stuff. But I mean, on top of all this that, you have to do with this lifestyle, I mean, the one thing that shocked me more than anything else when I was starting this podcast, and I was aware of it a little bit because I had friends in college that competed, was that for so many of these competitors, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than your working out. It's harder than your nutrition. I like to compare it now to being, a perfect driver where you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
So I look back at videos where I thought I was posing well. Terrible. It was just awful. So I definitely think that it's been a long time coming. I've gotten a lot better, but I it's something that I have to work at for sure. And there's certain poses that you realize like that don't look great for you, and so you have to adjust those. And I don't know if you know, but Fit Bliss, we're online, so I have to send like a lot of videos. But what's really cool about that is I get to watch myself over and over again on these videos, which I think is super important. But definitely have to work at it.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that's especially true with bikini is that I mean, you have to have your own flair, you have to have your own sass, and that's something that I mean, I really think you have to be born with. You can't really be taught that. Was that something that came easy for you, or is that something that you kind of struggled to sort of, maybe channel it and get it released? Because I know some people, I mean, they can just, they could walk right off the street and be in bikini, and then other people, I mean, it's like it's years of practice just to be able to develop that, sort of attitude that you need to have.
I definitely think that it took a little bit of time to to kind of get that little flair, that little attitude. My coach would say, when you turn to the back, like, try to have a different expression on your face. And so I definitely had to learn that a little bit over time. But once you find like your groove, you definitely kind of start to flow, and that kind of comes with it. That confidence comes with it. So
No, and that's yeah, just like with anything in life, I mean, just practice, practice, practice. And that's one thing though that, with this lifestyle is that I mean, you can never be perfect at it. I mean, posing, it's always ever evolving. You can completely master it, and then they're like, "Oh, we want to see something else." And then so yeah, it's just always constantly a work in progress. But when you step on that stage, what is that feeling like for you? Because I mean, you've worked months upon months for that look. And since you also played softball, I mean, I always make the illusion for baseball. Like for me pitching, I'd be out there, like 20 games pitching, and then, I'd be in the outfield for like the other 40 or 50 or so. And then, you know, so I got to compete in almost everything for such a large amount of time. But for bodybuilding, I mean, you're working out even harder than you ever did probably for softball, and yet you're only on that stage for like a couple of minutes. So, what is that feeling like for you, knowing that I mean, it's extra special that you really got to enjoy that limited amount of time?
yeah, so you definitely like take it in. So the only way for me to describe it is like an overwhelming, I don't know, just feeling. Basically, what happened for me is, don't get me wrong, like I love the process. Actually, I love the process probably more than being on stage. Like I remember thinking sometimes, well, I did 4 shows within like 2 months, but I remember thinking, man, I'm kind of sad like the process is going to be over. But when I finally stepped on stage at really all of my shows, I remember coming off and I almost broke into tears, but in a thankful, like, joyful tears, because I literally just feel so thankful to like have the opportunity to step on stage. And I'm never actually nervous getting on stage, which is really really convenient and really nice. But I definitely know that like my heart's there because I literally step off stage and I almost want to just bawl my eyes out because I just feel so thankful. And I just literally take a second and I pray and I just say thank you for letting me do this. And then we go from there. But I love it, and it is kind of crazy that you work so hard for so many months, for that 30 seconds. And I think about that sometimes too. But that's why it's so important to love the process that you're going through. Just enjoy it, take it all in. So.
Well, and when you're on that stage, does time seem to slow down, or is it sort of sped up, or is it a mixture? Because we hear a wide variety of answers on this.
Mm, I would say a mixture. I don't know. Like there's times where I'm up there and it just feels, well, actually no, I think it goes by pretty fast. It just feels so good to be up there. I don't know. That's a hard one to answer for me.
Well, I think it really depends on your experience though too, because if you think you're doing bad, then it probably seems a lot longer than it is. Whereas if you're doing good, you're like,
Yeah.
oh my god, that's it. That's the only thing that I could really imagine with that. But now, what is your go-to post-show meal?
Mm, I'm definitely a pizza girl, but I always have some kind of a sweet, like something planned. And my thing is cupcakes, and so I'm always on the lookout for any kind of cake or cupcakes. That's my thing.
Yep, that would be probably close to mine too as well. But I mean, another myth that I also love to bust on this podcast is that so many people don't understand that look that you guys present on stage, that is not a sustainable look. I mean, so many people, I think, just because they watch shows like Biggest Loser or something like that, where people go on and they lose hundreds of pounds, and some of them are able to maintain the weight loss that they've had. I think a lot of people watch stuff like that, and then they just assume that, because you guys have worked just as hard, if not harder, that, oh, they must be able to keep that look that they have on stage just because they work so hard at it. But they don't realize that you've manipulated your body with everything that goes into it, with the water manipulation, with all the other things that happen. What was that like when you first realized that, like, hey, this look that I present on stage, it's not sustainable? And has that gotten easier for you to accept that as you've done more shows?
Yeah, it definitely has gotten easier. But I will say, after my first year of competing, I didn't expect to. I mean, I didn't rebound or anything necessarily. I just went back to normal. But for me to go back to normal like I did, it definitely was kind of weird. And I don't know what people thought. I didn't really care, but I knew that I felt like how did I let this go? But really I was right where I needed to be, and I built the most muscle during that time. It was a great off season, or a great improvement season for me, but that was definitely like an adjustment to kind of figure that out for myself. Now it's kind of funny. I have people messaging me and they're like, "Oh, like I want to get on your level, this and that." And I'm like, "Well, like I'm not like this all the time. Like I'm normal, I'm starting to become my normal weight now." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, whatever. You still look good." And I'm like, "Well, you don't get it. Like I can't sustain the look that you think that I'm, doing. So I definitely think it's easier for me, but other people don't really understand it. So
Yeah, and it's I just compare it to starting your own business where you got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle, you got to spend money to make money. I mean, unfortunately, those two go hand in hand, and some people do struggle with that, and they try to maintain it year round, and a lot of times there's a lot of health issues that go into play with that, and then your career is most likely going to be shortened too. So that's just another thing that people gotta watch out for. But cardio is definitely a trigger word for me because I hate cardio more than life itself. Being that being a pitcher, I had to run a lot. I mean now during the pandemic, like I said, I'm at my parents and we have workout equipment, but it's not nearly as nice as it would be. So I do a lot of walking. I don't consider walking cardio. When I say cardio, I mean like that high intensity stuff. But what is your relationship like with cardio? Because it's definitely a mixture for a lot of people.
I actually love cardio. It definitely was a good time for me just to kind of like zone out, or like I'd read the Bible, or I'd read some kind of, or listen to some kind of podcast, or read whatever I needed to do. So I use that as my time, for my mental. But I appreciate it. Like it's funny. I just bought a treadmill this week, and so I love it. And I usually go between stair steppers or like a treadmill at an incline. But even in my off season, like I definitely want to take like just a little bit of time. Like if my coach told me no cardio, I'd be really sad. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean it's different for so many people, but yeah, I mean like I said, I could walk for, like 8 hours a day every day and I'd be fine with that, just the high intensity stuff. And I could go on bike rides too, which I mean, good luck doing that outside right now. But I mean the most important thing, and you can probably tell that I've had a lack of it, is sleep. I mean, sleep is the most important thing when it comes to this lifestyle, and probably the most important thing overall. I mean, and then for anyone that disagrees with me, I always tell them go pull an all-nighter and then go and work out and then tell me how you did. I did that twice in college by mistake, and I lasted half the workout and I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I got to go back to bed. So what is your recommended amount of sleep that you try to get? Because it varies from person to person. Is there anything that you like to do in order to get that amount? Because especially in this day and age with technology, I mean, everyone's always on, their social media, and that makes it harder for people to sleep. And I mean, yeah, there's some people that can function off of 4 hours of sleep, and there's some people that need their like 10 hours of sleep. So where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, so I'm usually a 6 to 8 range. It just depends. So basically, like I think my biggest thing that helped me, especially for prep, it's a little bit different now, and I kind of give myself a little bit of grace if I decide that I don't want to go to bed as early. But I tried to set like a limit of going to bed, or a time to go to bed by 8 p.m. when I was in prep. Sometimes I wouldn't get into bed till like 9 or 9:30, but you also have to realize like I'm getting up at 3:30 a.m. For my coaching at F45. So like I had to kind of balance that out, which was tough, like with prep and doing that. But my biggest thing, and I think like my biggest tool to make sure that I was getting in bed at a good time and making sure my recovery was good, is I don't know if you've ever heard of a Whoop.
Yep.
Have you heard of those?
Yep.
Okay, love it. And so that honestly helped me so much because it did make me realize, it kind of rewarded myself to know like my recovery was good based on me sleeping well and things like that.
For any of our listeners that don't know, what is a whoop?
Yeah, of course. So, a Whoop is a device that you have on your wrist. Basically, you wear it all the time. So you wear it when you're sleeping. I actually do take it off in the shower, but you can wear it. They are waterproof. But basically, what it does is it tracks your recovery. It tracks your sleep. There is an auto set to know like when you go to sleep, when you wake up. It tracks like your respiratory rate, which is super important. And I can go into that in more detail of how like that relates to COVID and stuff. And it's super important. It tracks like all these different things, but basically the whole point of it and the whole concept is to know your recovery and how well your body's recovering, which is super important for really anybody, because you're not going to function at your full amount when you're not recovering well. So just like he was saying with sleep and stuff, it's so important. So that's what a Whoop is.
Do you know how it's able to tell when you're asleep? Does it just sense it just from like your pulse or something like that?
I honestly science behind it, which I've looked into some things, but yeah.
I'll have to look it up because yeah, that's fascinating to me. It's like, how the hell does it know when you're asleep and then it knows exactly when you're? I mean, obviously, if like you move, it probably knows that you're awake. But yeah, that's just fascinating. But yeah, we'll get right into COVID because yeah, it's one thing that I mean, for people our generation, it's impacted us, at least job wise and stuff like that. Which that's a whole different thing. But it's been one thing that's impacted everyone's lives in more ways than we could have ever imagined. I mean, like I told her before, the gyms are still closed in Minnesota probably until February, which is just it's just ridiculous. But yeah, everyone's been having their own struggles and journeys with it. So what has your experience been like during this whole pandemic? Because everyone's been different. And I mean, we've had people that have even put on muscle, and I was like, what the hell are you doing then if you're able to do that? But what's your journey been like through all this?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. I mean, I basically through COVID, I mean, I competed, I did 4 shows, I did a whole prep, I did all that. And somehow didn't get it until now, but that's it's fine. I made it through, but and I'm glad I made it through all my shows without getting it, including travel and everything like that. Super thankful for that. But in my experience, I mean, it's affected me, but I've been very careful. I still was able to at first I wasn't able to go to the gym obviously, so I had to do a lot of at-home workouts at the start of my cut. But then I was able to go to the gym and I still was able to make quite the normal progress. I choose to wear a mask. For a while we had to wear a mask. I still choose to wear a mask while I work out. If I'm on the treadmill, I don't. But that's also spaced out a little bit more. I just take my precautions, but you can still definitely thrive in the gym. You just be careful. That's all.
No, and I mean, at least you have that to get out because yeah, I'm almost at that breaking point where it was like I don't care, and I got it in March actually last year. I was one of the because I went to a casino. That's the only place that I could have got it because no one at my work had it, no one at my house had it. So I literally and I didn't even know what it was because I just felt like a little funny. And then after I got it, I went and got tested, and they're like, oh yeah, you have the antibodies for it. So I didn't even know that I'd had it until after I was already it had already passed. So yeah, it's definitely so. What was it? Did you just have like mild symptoms or what was it like for you?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. So basically, I decided to go to Florida with my sister and my nieces. It was a super, like, I knew it was going to be like a chill thing, but obviously, somewhere along those lines, I got it. And this was New Year's Day, New Year's Eve. We went during that time. It was a lot of fun. I don't regret it at all. But I came back, and that Monday, I kind of had just like a little bit of a scratchy throat. And then the next day, I just felt a little bit off, but still like mild symptoms. And then by Wednesday, I actually felt better, but I still felt a little off. But I told myself I'd go get tested just in case because I knew I had been out of town. And sure enough, I was positive. But I swear to you, I did not believe it until I lost my scent, my taste and smell. Once I lost that the next day, I was like, oh, I really do have COVID. And so that was the extent of it. It never got worse than that, luckily for me.
Do you have
So.
your sense of smell back and everything?
Yes, thank God. That was the worst. And I know like I'm being a baby because there's people who are really struggling, with this, but it was the worst because I
There we go. Now
really
another
do.
dog. Oh, look at it. Oh,
Yeah, go
that's the mat. Is that the other one? Yeah, that is.
ahead,
Oh, that is a
Lauren.
big, big
Okay,
dog.
buddy.
What's his name?
Okay, let's. So 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 anyway, wow.
Oh God.
Okay. He- well, I guess let's just hold on for just 2 seconds so it
Not a
doesn't do that in the
problem.
middle of me talking.
Not a problem.
Are
Oh, he
you
is
okay,
so cute.
bud?
Oh,
He's lit. This is my baby.
yeah.
He's sweet. Okay,
Oh.
so do you want me to get him out before
Not
I
a. I mean, he can stay
continue?
as long as he wants. Not a problem. If he wants to stay here, he can stay here. No worries.
You okay, buddy? So where was I at? I think where were we at on that? I don't
I'm
remember.
trying to remember even that too. Oh, you were talking about how you got your sense of smell back.
Yes. Okay. So as far as my sense of smell and taste, it's the weirdest thing because you legitimately feel like you're in the dark. And the only way I could explain it, it actually kind of made my anxiety go up a little bit because I was still starving and everything else felt normal. But when you don't have that, it's like you're in the dark. So like imagine if I mean seriously you're in the dark and you have to feel around. Like you just don't know like what's going on. Your body's just not working, properly or like having to pick something up but not having touch. Like how weird would that be? And that's kind of the only way I can explain it. But luckily, within a couple days it did start to come back. So today I'm like probably, I would say 75%. So we're like making our way back to that 100%, and I'm so thankful for that, because what was really freaking me out is that some people don't get it back for months, and that would have been horrible. I'm such a foodie and I love my sweets, and I don't know how I would have survived. So
Well, here's the thing. That might be the one time where I ever eat like lettuce or anything like that. Is if I don't have any sense of taste anyway. Because I was like, hey, if I don't know what it is anyway, I could just stuff it all in my mouth. So, hey, that might be the one thing that gets. Yeah. Hey, so hey, that might be a positive thing at least for me to start eating a little bit more healthier then, because I'm like, yeah, I can just shove it all in my mouth then, and who cares if I don't know what it tastes like? I won't be sick. But that's with COVID. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to really mess around with it. But yeah, I think it's just it just gets so frustrating at times. And I just hope by the end of next year or something like that, we'll be back to something normal and we'll have it figured out. But who knows? I mean, I can still remember talking to someone who's a nurse, about a month or about a week into this, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it'll be gone in like 2 weeks." And then I should do like a tile card. It's like 10 months later, we're still talking. But so yeah, who knows? But how have you been dealing with this whole thing mentally too? Because I mean, so many people don't talk about just the how people have been dealing with this pandemic mentally, because everyone's always just focused on like, oh, how are you doing, you don't have the virus. But so many people don't understand that human beings are not meant to be isolated like this. As you can tell with me, I'm a very talkative person, so this podcast has become my therapy during this pandemic, where I've been doing this podcast for 2.5 years, but I was lucky that I already had it established before then. But how have you mentally been dealing with this whole pandemic?
yeah, I definitely have my ups and downs. I feel like everyone's probably had that as well or experienced that. And sometimes when you do kind of have like those more lonely kind of feels, I mean, I'm big on like family and my friends, so I definitely pick up the phone and I just call them and I just talk and I just kind of spread like a little bit of joy back and forth on that, and I think it helps both people. So I think that's super important, just to reach out to the people that you care about during this time. But I've definitely had my ups and downs, and I think that it's normal to do that.
100%. And speaking on, the mental side of it too, especially with this sport too. I mean, this is so much more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey. It's like 10 times as much, because, I mean, people can walk up to you and say, "Oh my God, Lauren, you look amazing." They just notice the physical changes, because it's not really possible for them to notice the mental changes. But what has this whole journey been like for you mentally? Because, I mean, there's so many positives that go along with this too, but then you're also going to get body dysmorphia for a lot of bodybuilders too. I mean, there's always some negatives that go with the positives, but what has this as a whole been like for you mentally? Because just that strength that people develop, not only physically, also appears in the mind for so many of them as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster, and I feel like most competitors can agree to that as well. Like I said, I did about 4 shows within 2 months. So at first, I mean, we started off really strong just because I was so excited to compete, and I just felt so good in the gym. I know. I just felt so good in the gym. But then once you start to get kind of like a little bit more less energy, things like that. And once I was into my really that fourth show is where I knew my body was tired. And I was mentally tired as well. When I got to that point, it was tough. And then people, they say like afterwards, I mean, don't get me wrong, like you want to eat everything in sight. And, people are quick to be like, oh, honey, you deserve it. You deserve it. And so every time that was, said, it almost irked my nerves, because I'm like, but I work so hard and like, you're just letting me, but really it's you. And then you learn to kind of like find that control again and that inner peace of like, you know what, like, this food's going to be around, forever, or, forever basically. But mentally, I think that you try to cope with it in different ways. And that was one way I was like, oh, food, but you have to find a balance in between that too. So
100%. What was your friends and family's reaction like when you said that you wanted to do bodybuilding? Because I know that you told me your dad was a special case in and of itself, but what was the overall reaction where they're like, "Oh, Lauren's going to be a bodybuilder now, I guess."
yeah, so I feel like I kind of was like a little bit laughed at. I mean, they love me, but when I told them that, but I mean, same thing when I told them I was quitting the bank and I was becoming a personal trainer and like all this stuff, they kind of were like, okay, then like, but I think that they've realized that I'm such a go-getter that no matter what I do, I'm gonna give my all and potentially succeed, I hope, in most things that I do. So at first it definitely was a big, a thing, but now like everyone's really supportive and they come to my shows and things like that. But it definitely is a different I think everybody with bodybuilding, because you show your body, you have to treat and make sure like they understand that you're an athlete and you're not there just to be like this, you know, whatever. And so I think that that was a big step of like people understanding, athlete versus the other side. So
100%. And on top of that, whenever you go out in public, especially when you're close to, your show look, I mean, if you were to walk out in public show, look, even dressed the way you are right now, I mean, you are going to get stares just because it's human nature when they see something that's not of the normal. They just be like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. And you sort of become like a mini celebrity. That's the best way I can really compare it to is. So, how have you been dealing with that? Just that you are going to get a little bit more attention, especially the closer you get to a show, because some people, they struggle with it because they're a little bit more shy, but then other people are just like, yeah, it's whatever. But where do you fall on that? Because it's just amazing how much more attention you get just by the way that you look physically.
yeah, it is pretty crazy. I don't know, like, so for me, I don't know what my deal is, but when people give me a compliment, I kind of like my face turns red. I get this whole like I don't know, and so I kind of like start to sweat. So when people do come up to me and say that, it does kind of make me feel that way. But also at the same time, like I'm proud of like how far I've come. So it is kind of it is nice to kind of get that basically like you've done this, good job, kind of feel. Um, but you definitely do get attention, and sometimes some people take it in the wrong way. Like so many people will comment on my Instagram, or I've had people DM me some really
Yes.
inappropriate. And so I hate that. I've gone off on people and said I'm an athlete and don't talk to me like that. So I'm big on that.
That was the one thing that shocked me more than anything else, where I was like, oh my God, what these women, especially women, have to go through. I mean, I've had people share me screenshots, and I've even had some people message me like that too, because they don't know that I'm a guy. They just thought that I'm a girl that's trying to promote this because I don't post pictures of my face on my Instagram page. So yeah, it's crazy where I'm just like, dude, you don't like what is wrong? Who's ever gonna say yes to that? Like who do you respond that says, oh yeah, yeah, right? So yeah, it's just yeah, I don't even want to get into that because that's going to be a podcast that I'm actually working on myself where it's like I'm going to even title it like how to not be a creep basically is what I'm going to title it, and basically when talking to people, because yeah, it's so many people really need to learn that because it's ridiculous. We're like that's why even like when I messaged you to come on the podcast, I try to make the message like as non-creepy as possible because like I know that it could be construed the wrong way. It's like, hey, you want to come on my podcast and stuff like that. So yeah, it's something that even I've had to deal with too. So yeah, it's yeah, that's a really insane part about it. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, what with human beings and stuff like that. But yeah, and two questions that I love to ask before we wrap things up is that if someone were also to walk up to you and say, Lauren, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, and everyone would go along with it. What would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Um, I think that something that I'd like to see changed in bodybuilding is probably, um, maybe the way. I don't know, dang, this one's hard. This one's
Not a
really
problem.
hard.
Not a problem. Here, I'll give you my examples first that I've heard a ton that I've totally agreed with, so that you can have some time to think. So, I mean, one for me obviously is that with the judging too, it needs to be a little bit more, balanced because whenever you have humans judging other humans, I mean, you're gonna have mistakes made. You're gonna have human error. Trust me, being a baseball pitcher and you being a softball player, I bet you know all about human error with those damn umpires. Don't even get me started on that. But yeah, just with that too, and also I mean, with just all the requirements that go into it too, and just the pay too, because it's like these bodybuilders are not making money. Everyone, unless you win the Olympia, you are not going to make money doing this sport. So it's like they lose money actually going into these things. So just make it something like that too, and just also, I mean, just help promote it a little bit more, and make sure that people realize that they're not going to ever look like that if they just are your average gym goer. So just stuff like that. But yeah, that's that. Those are mine at least.
Yeah, so for me, I definitely think that the price going into it is so much. I love it, and so like it is worth it. But I spent a lot of money this year on those four shows, and traveling to Arizona, traveling to Orlando, for two of them, and another one just a 2-hour drive. But regardless, I just wish that it was a little bit cheaper because I feel like I don't know if people know this, but a national show is $350 typically for an entry fee. That's just a lot of money, and when you put that together for every single competitor, they're just making bank. So it would be nice for that to be a little bit cheaper. Suits are so expensive, things of that nature. And then I definitely do think that judging can be tough. Um I feel like definitely, they try to be as fair as they can. Just like, like you said, most umpires, I feel like do try to be fair, but at the end of the day, it's up to them and you really can't change, what happens. So it would be cool if somehow bodybuilding could be, a more consistent, approach on judging. But um, that's also what makes it so fun is that, one show you could do really well, the next show you could do bad, and then the next show you could become a pro. You just don't know, and like that's just part of the fun, and that could be, right, weekend after weekend, and that could be the turnout. So it's kind of cool, but
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that part too. And if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your life? Because I mean, if we were to have talked a year ago and you would have predicted a global pandemic and everything that went down, I mean, I would have called you a liar and bet my entire life savings against it. But goes to show that how much we know really about the future. But because who knows, we could be talking a year from today and there could be a fire in the background. You could hear gunshots in the background. Who knows where the world's going to be at a year from today? But in an ideal world, where would you like to be at with your bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at just with your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved when we talk a year from today?
yeah. So my biggest goals right now are to become pro. Obviously, that's a big goal that I have in mind. Another thing is I do actually want to start coaching competitors. So that's a goal that I hope that will be coming by mid to end year. So we'll see. We'll keep you posted on that. But then also, plan. I plan to go ahead and get my online clients. Hopefully, have a full online client base by the end of the year. And then also, I still work at F45, and so like my goal is to continue to do that and really build up our F45 in the local area. I love it there. I love all the people, all the members, and so that's kind of my three main goals for this year. So
Well, and that's awesome. And is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
okay, shout out to Fit Bliss. Those are my people. Shout out to F45, Mount Juliet. Love all them and all the members. And I think those are my people. So
That's awesome. And, everyone, I'll leave a link to all that stuff down below. And I'll leave a link to Lauren so that everyone can go and check her out. Buyer beware. You will be inspired to get in shape and, stop eating those Twinkies and get off the couch. But again, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
no, thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I love doing this. And like I said, it's coronavirus. I don't have that much to do, regardless. I mean, I could do 10 of these a day. But, again, you guys, everyone go and check her out. And again, you guys, we cannot thank her enough for coming on and hopefully making me feel a little bit warmer just because she's from Tennessee where it's a little bit warmer there. I mean, I'm looking outside right now and I'm just getting dreary, but we'll wrap it up before I get into that. So again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot signing out. Have a great day, everyone.